Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 15th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week my guest co-host is another one of my former reporting rivals. He's a true journalist on the Carolina coast. My guest co-host this week is Trevor Donnell. Hello, Trevor. How are you doing?
How's it going, Liam? Doing very well over here. How's things out in Tennessee for you?
Oh, doing pretty good. I am, as I just mentioned to you just before, very congested. This is the, toward the end of winter in the South, which means that, I can't breathe, pretty much at any point. My allergies are absolutely out of control.
That's okay. I'm right there with you. I don't know what the weather's like there, but it has been 70s here, 30s at night. Mm-hmm. It hasn't hit me yet, but I swear it's going to soon. And when it does, it puts me down. I mean, it's absolutely awful.
Yeah, I think we call that Fool Spring in the South.
Fall spring, second spring, something like that, maybe?
Second spring, and then third winter, and at some point we'll probably get like a weird snowstorm, and then it'll be spring at some point.
It will. March is when it snows. It'll be third winter in March. Yeah.
We're getting there. So Trevor and I first met when we were both working as reporters in Jacksonville, North Carolina, usually constantly trying to scoop the other, and to be fair, Trevor usually won that battle. Now Trevor is an editor in New Bern, North Carolina, overseeing 3 newspapers on North Carolina's coast: the New Bern Sun-Journal, the Kinston Free Press, and the Jacksonville Daily News, which you may recognize if you listen to episode 6 of this podcast about the Mariah Woods case, because we cited a lot of reporting from that newspaper quite a bit.
I know you've been following it a lot lately. I know we've talked about it, since you've left as well. And that I won't spill, any wine or anything like that in that aspect. But there has been a resolution to that case, and I'm sure if anybody doesn't know about it, certainly tune in to that 6th episode and find out more about it for sure. But yeah, it was a wild, wild story.
Yeah, sad story. I guess good ending, I suppose. Someone, spoiler alert, was held accountable, I suppose. But I mean, it was really tense. So if you have not listened to episode 6, go back. It's a ride of an episode. So let's get over to our wine of the week. Trevor, what do you think? Let's do this.
I have not tried it yet. Have you tried it?
Well, I usually like to, because I am a huge cork wine drinker guy. So I like to have that little pop, of like getting the cork opener. Yeah. It just really sets the tone for the rest of the episode. You know what I mean, Trevor?
I like it. See, I've messed up and I already opened mine. And I poured it. So, I have mine, ready to go.
Cheers to you. Thanks for coming on this week.
Cheers. Cheers. That is surprisingly smooth. Yeah. And smoother than I thought it was going to be. Wow.
And a very subtle red. So this week we are drinking Ménage Trois Red Blend from California. It's a blend of Zinfandel, Merlot, and Cabernet. So a pretty unique combination of grapes for a red blend. The Zinfandel brings flavors of blackberry and raspberry jam. The Merlot brings a generous mouth, and the Cabernet brings what it's known for: rich flavors and firm tannins. And I definitely feel the firm tannins for sure. I don't really get the rich flavors of what a Cabernet you typically understand a Cabernet to be. And typically when I think of Cabernets, Merlots, I think of very bold flavors. So I definitely feel like it's very heavily on the Zinfandel in terms of the subtleness to it.
Wow. There is a lot of subtleness to it, but it still packs a punch. It still has some really good flavor to it.
Yeah. I get it a lot at the back of the mouth.
Yeah. It's, I must say, as it's going down my throat right now, it was, I can still taste it, and it is a good taste, a strong taste. But what I was concerned about with this one, when you showed it to me earlier, was when I spoke to my wife, and she said, "You know what a red blend is?" And I said, "No." And she said it was something that they get towards the end of the barrel or the end of the things of that nature. They kind of all put it together. And I said, "Wow." I said, I feel like that would just be awful something that's sitting there for so long. And no, so smooth, surprisingly smooth. And I'm not a big red wine drinker. I'm not a very dry wine drinker guy. I like something sweet, something a little tangy, sparkling, things of that nature. But I would 100% drink this with a steak or a red meat or something like that. It's very smooth.
I can definitely see it going very well with those red meats. That's typically what you kind of understand. I guess I guess is where the Merlot comes from. Is those meaty flavors for sure. So I actually also did some research on blends because this is the very first blend that I'm drinking on this podcast. So according to knowwines.com, red blends typically bring two different varieties of wine together: soft meets firm or light meets bold, etc. Making red blends is actually one of the most fiscally responsible forms of wine creation, kind of what you were just talking about, Trevor. And that's because when growing those grapes, losing some of a certain kind of grape may result in a lower amount of that kind of wine for a vineyard. But blending the grapes allows farmers to make the same amount of wine without wasting crop and while maintaining their bottom line.
So you've been learning a lot of stuff about wine. I've not known half of that myself. And again, I'm not a big wine drinker, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not that big of a drinker really at all. But if I do, I do drink wine, but I have my own, certain favorites and things of that nature. But that's interesting how they were able to, like you said, you don't want to waste any, you don't want to, lose out on your bottom dollar and your bottom line either. But, that's just a smart business model of how can you, take something that's left over or that you might throw out and put together for good use.
Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying this one for sure. I'm a huge Ménage à Trois fan, just in general. I really like their Cabernets. So what do you say we transition into a story this week, Trevor? I am so excited to tell you about this. I think you're going to be absolutely blown away by this story.
I'm ready for it. I've left it up to you as well. As the wine, I'm saving my my expressions and my notes here for you, sir. So yes, please. Fill me in.
Let's go for it. So this week, I want to tell you about a secret online enterprise that cost one man his life. The monetary desire for a bizarre but unique digital good that goes for thousands of dollars online led a group of people to prey on victims in a dangerous form of intimidation. This week, I'm going to tell you the story of Shane Sonderman, the serial swatter. April 27th, 2020 started just like about any other Monday for the Herring family. The family went to work and went about their lives. But out of the blue that evening, something strange starts to happen that doesn't really seem too odd at first, but definitely gets a little weirder as the night goes on. Mark Herring's two daughters get a cash-only pizza delivery to their homes made out in their dad's name. Again, it's like a little strange, but not super alarming because they never ordered a pizza, but they shoo away the delivery driver and start texting their father trying to figure out what's going on, but he never answers. They likely assumed that it was just a misunderstanding of some kind, but then it happened again to both of them. And then again. After several of these deliveries, they decide to call their father's girlfriend and ask if everything was okay with their father. She says, no, everything is definitely not okay. She is in a cop car following an ambulance with Mark inside, and they're on the way to the hospital.
So, okay. That's pretty strange that you've got a random pizza delivery coming over and over again. So what happens? What happens next?
So 60-year-old Mark Herring is having a very normal evening at his home in Sumner County, Tennessee, just northeast of Nashville, when suddenly he hears sirens and they're coming right for his house. So confused, he walks outside onto the porch to see what's going on. That's when a SWAT team draws their guns, points them at Mark, and tells them that he needs to put his hands up and walk right toward them, and he cooperates. Well, he starts walking and offers to open the gate to walk through outside, but the SWAT team instructs him not to and instead to climb over the gate. But Mark is like a big guy and not able to pull himself over the gate, so he's going to crawl underneath it, and the SWAT team says, okay, you can do that. But when he pulls himself under the gate, he gets up and immediately collapses. He's having a heart attack, and Mark is immediately rushed to the hospital, but dies shortly after.
Wow. That's that's already putting yourself in a pickle right there. So,
Mm-hmm.
so why was the SWAT team called?
Well, earlier that day, there was a 911 call made out for Mark's address. The caller said that they were living in the home and that they had shot someone in the head there. The caller also threatened to set off pipe bombs at the front and back of the home if police came. So that's why police didn't want Mark opening the gate, because they were afraid that that would trigger a possible explosion.
Okay, so that makes a little bit more sense then. I mean, I'm just confused there as to why it would matter to not go through the gate or just, let people in, things of that nature. But to have to go under or go over something, I mean, that's you clearly know something's up right there. So
Right.
Oh, so how did all of this happen?
Well, to really understand what happened to Mark, we have to go back years to the beginning of a popular social media website called Twitter. In an interview with the New York Times, Mark's 3 daughters remembered the last time they saw their father. It was about a month before he suddenly dropped dead. They all went to a Sunday dinner, which was hosted by their mother, Mark's ex-wife, who Mark still had a pretty good relationship with. They remembered their father as the smartest man they knew. He was a computer programmer for the state of Tennessee, like a real tech guy. He was so into technology that when Twitter first came out in 2006 and really changed the social media scene, Mark created a profile just a few months later. Being early on in the life of the website, Mark was able to choose a pretty unique Twitter handle. His daughters tell WKRN, the ABC affiliate in Nashville, that he chose the username at Tennessee because of his love for his home state and also for the Tennessee Vols, the mascot for the University of Tennessee at Knoxville.
Pretty standard name, I would say, right there. I mean, it's a Tennessee guy. I'm sure you're enjoying the Tennessee Vols, and especially all the success that has come with that school and sports,
Right.
things of that nature. So pretty standard. Sounds like it's very very vanilla.
Well, and also too, like looking back from 2023, like I tried to do like my name, which I like feel like I have a pretty fairly unique name, and I try to do like Liam Collins like 7, and it like makes me go all the way up to like 64 before I get a number that actually like lets me make a handle.
Right.
So, like, looking back, like at Tennessee, like pretty desirable name, I would guess. So Mark got pretty lucky there.
Yeah, back then there was probably nothing that was stopping him for that. Thinking in 2006 now of
Right.
when I was on Twitter or Facebook and things of that nature, and then we're talking back when I was in high school. Man, you could pretty much come up with anything you wanted to at that point.
Right.
Man, Mark.
And like who knew like what social media would become in 2023,
Yeah.
like insane. Like you probably didn't even think twice about it. But he like never really used the platform. I mean, Mark only tweeted from the account just 31 times total, but the account has about 1,000 followers in 2023. But just a few years later, after he created the account, Mark started to realize just how prime the digital real estate he created was. He started getting out of the blue phone calls from people wanting him to sell the handle to them. But he thought the requests were pretty silly. I mean, maybe he thought they were scams, so he just brushed them off and just totally ignored them and said, nope, not selling.
Okay, it's getting a little bit more interesting now. People will do, I mean, I understand, people will do some crazy things for, in the name of, business and money and, exposure, things of that nature. And, Mark, with something that's so basic, but is branded almost probably in that part of the country. Yeah, that's a very interesting turn you've just taken there.
Yeah, and it's about to take even more turns, Trevor, so definitely refill your glass if you haven't already. So he was getting offers to buy the handle for $3,000 to $4,000, but it's not just that account. The FBI eventually wrote in their press release about this case that unique Twitter and Instagram handles can be sold for thousands of dollars each. And keep in mind, these are digital properties that can only be held by one person or one entity. The accounts can either be sold under the table or on online marketplaces of sorts. The Guardian interviewed the creator of Forum Corner, an online forum that lists legally obtained accounts for sale. The brokers of sorts, according to The Guardian, will offer specific handles a few bucks for accounts, but if they're successful, will turn it around and sell it for hundreds of dollars in profits. Twitter, though, prohibits these sales. In their terms of use policies, the website says explicitly that attempts to buy, sell, or solicit other forms of payment in exchange for usernames are also violations and may result in permanent account suspension. But that hasn't stopped these backdoor steals. In 2010, the state of Israel reportedly bought the handle @Israel for 6 figures. CNN allegedly employed the original owner of @CNNBRK as a consultant in exchange for that handle, which is now the media company's breaking news account.
So $3,000 to $4,000 for a sale of a Twitter handle is incredible. I mean, I wish I was creative enough as Mark was to just come up with something so simple like that and get $3,000 to $4,000 off of it.
Yeah, and in like 2006, like I was thinking about like MySpace, which doesn't even use handles. Like I was really slacking on that, huh?
MySpace, man, yeah, how the times have changed.
Yeah, seriously, I could have been rolling in it if I, worried less about my top 3 friends and worried more about, trying to get on Twitter and, potentially making, a couple $1,000 on a couple of unique Twitter handles.
So basically, obviously, this is, you mentioned earlier, this is prohibited and these types of sales are prohibited, but obviously that hasn't stopped anybody. And I'm sure this happens, quite frequently, if not almost daily to some degree. Even to this day. So
yeah, I would guess so.
Where does that lead us into now?
Well, so yeah, there are these like legal transactions kind of out in the open, but there are also these intense broker deals that are done entirely in the dark and outside of the law. And Mark is about to find out that some of these buyers won't take no for an answer. So, Trevor, how is your Ménage à Trois going down right now?
It's going down smooth. I mean, it was the first thing that I think I mentioned earlier was, and I probably should have mentioned this before, that it might be dangerously smooth, yes. for people. I mean, you might have a couple of glasses of these and think back later on, wow, I mean, I may have overdone it.
Definitely the kind of wine that you want to like drink with, like, I don't know, like your favorite podcast, like just a thought.
I like that. Seamless plug. I like that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, let's transition back into our story. What do you say, Trevor? I'm like really in the thick of it, I feel like right now.
I know you've taken a turn that I was not expected, and now I need more.
Yeah, well, so fast forwarding back to April 27, 2020, that morning, Mark received another anonymous phone call. And then another phone call, another offer to buy his unique Twitter handle for thousands of dollars. Again, Mark shakes off the offer by the anonymous caller and declines it. He never reported ever feeling like threatened by the caller or afraid of their persistence at all. But later that day, when pizza and police start showing up to his home and also his daughter's home, the family realizes that things had escalated and escalated quickly. The persistent buyer had found Mark's information online and they posted it on the social media app Discord. That's where another broker used that information to send those pizzas and call 911, claiming to be in Mark's home by saying that they had just shot someone. It's a process called swatting, a prank call to emergency services with the intention of sending a large number of armed officers and first responders to a specific address. It usually has the intention of pressuring or threatening a specific individual in a way that makes people feel less safe in the place they should feel the most safe, inside of their homes. They wanted to just put the pressure on Mark, but they ended up costing him his life before anyone could realize that this whole situation was just one big hoax.
That's a scary, situation to be put in right there. And that is a very unsettling, thing to have happen to you of, because you personally know that that's not, you didn't make this call, you didn't order this, or you didn't do this, but to have it done over and over and over again.
Right.
Oh no. Yeah. That's extremely unsettling.
Well, and so the pizzas, I was like, at first I was like, wait, okay, like pizzas, like why is that? But then I was thinking, I was like, okay, if I just started getting pizzas to my house and for whatever reason it connected back to these people who were like trying to get something out of me, like the idea that they just like knew where I lived, like that's unsettling in and of itself, and so that was what, like, I was like, at first I was like what pizzas? And then I was like, no, like getting these random pizza calls, like that probably, again, knowing what they probably kind of had an idea of, what was going on, that's pretty spooky.
Right. One pizza, one call, a simple mistake,
Right.
an accident, something of that nature. 3, 4, 5 of them or so? No.
Something's up. Yeah,
No,
for sure.
That's unsettling.
Well, and there's actually a fascinating episode of a docuseries on Netflix about this, weird phenomenon too. It's called Web of Make-Believe, and it details how the practice became most popular on gaming streams. People would SWAT people's homes while they were live streaming on Twitch, a popular gaming platform, and then watch as police arrived and arrest the gamer live on their streaming platform.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to break out laughing or joking or anything like that. No, it's not
So
a joking
scary.
matter, but
Yeah.
it is scary. I don't know if you play games. I play games and things of that nature sometimes, and people can get downright rude and nasty, and I don't look into this kind of stuff too much, but I've seen videos where people have found their area codes or their surnames or things of that nature, and have found all kinds of different information where they went to high school, their obviously their addresses, their parents' name, things. What you can do now, on the web or just in a game on the internet is incredible. The reaches, goes so far, but that's unfortunate that it's, people are using it in this kind of way.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising.
Well, and I also even saw too, so I guess part of the reason why it started as gaming platforms was if one gamer, I suppose, was doing super well or maybe being a little bit more obnoxious, this other gamer would, resort to this swatting call as a way to get ahead, I guess, of the other person. And it was just very... Yeah, it's a really, it's like one episode of a large, docuseries, but it's a weird phenomenon. And there was even one part of that episode that I was telling you about, where the police arrived and talked right into the stream and was like, this isn't funny. You need to stop doing this. And it's crazy. It's crazy what people will do for a video game.
Right. And which is something that does not impact your life at all. You will this, survive. On the other hand, this story, this could impact whoever's, is going through with their lives. But a video game of something so simple, simplistic, and innocent and honest, no.
Right. Well, so police identified one of the people responsible for the swatting call at Mark's house as Shane Sonderman, who lived 3.5 hours away at the time in Tennessee along the Arkansas border, but was a minor when Mark died. But this was not the first time he had done this. They tied him to 5 other victims across the country going back to July of 2018. Some of those victims reported being harassed for as long as 4 years. But Mark was the only one who died. Police say he conspired with other people throughout the country and even overseas to create fake online accounts to find social media users with catchy names. They would have unpaid cash-only food delivered to victims' homes or report fires at their houses so firefighters would show up. It was all an effort to extort these people for their unique Instagram and Twitter handles so they could be sold to others for thousands of dollars. If they didn't agree right away, they would send threatening text messages and make threatening phone calls to the victims. In one case, callers went as far as to have their windows bricked and paid neighbors in Bitcoin to bully their victims. Police said Shane had victims in New York, Virginia, Michigan, and Oregon. In the case of the Oregon victim, Shane and his co-conspirators had sent emergency services to their parents' home in Ohio just 2 weeks before Mark had died. After firefighters showed up, Shane and his fellow broker sent text messages to their victims saying, "Did your parents enjoy the firefighters? I plan on killing your parents next if you do not hand the username on Instagram over to me."
Now, as if things couldn't get any more unsettling at that point, while you're telling me this story, I'm wondering in my head, if this would have ever happened to me or something like that, what would I do? How would I handle it? Things of that nature. And obviously one of which would be to call the cops, call the authorities, things of that, and try to see if we can't, find out who's doing this stuff. And it's almost as if in some cases that doesn't even matter.
Right.
It's a very scary situation right there for some of these victims that, have to wake up and go through the next day wondering if their parents are going to be on the line or their families.
Yeah. And well, I mean, what can you do? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you like, we hear all the time about how these like online cases are so hard to solve, right? Because they're, these perpetrators are, smart enough to use, services that you can't track the IP address back to, like all these things, if you're going to do this, like you better, go through the proper channels to make sure you're not caught. And so it's, it's almost like like I said, like what can you do to try to solve it? Because even if you do go to somebody, like it's probably just going to persist. They're probably not going to be able to find them. And then also too, like, even if, you do, like, they probably just going to pass it off to somebody, to one of their other co-conspirators, and their other friends to do the same thing.
If it gets to a serious situation like, this is right here, do you even decide to do something about it? If you do something about it or you make that phone call, what happens? And do these people actually wind up going through with their plan? Or, or do something worse.
Yeah, well, so Shane was eventually arrested by police in May of 2020. He was charged with wire fraud, conspiracy, interstate communication of threats, false information and hoaxes, and conspiracy. That's when he tells police that he did not do this all alone. Shane tells police that he was not the person who made that phone call. His alleged co-conspirator is a minor living in the United Kingdom, and he's the one who made the call. Now, this does match up to what police know about the situation, because police say the person who made that initial call to police that sent SWAT teams to Mark's home had a British accent. Because he was a minor, though, he was not extradited to the United States to be tried for his apparent involvement. Instead, Shane was the only person who was tried for the fake call that ultimately led to Mark's death. In March of the next year, Shane accepts a plea deal under the terms that all of the charges except for the conspiracy charge were dropped. Shane's lawyers asked the judge for mercy, saying Shane was young and inexperienced, and his lawyers say Shane had a complicated and unstable home life growing up. His family has a history of severe mental illnesses, and his father had committed suicide just 2 weeks before his 18th birthday.
Very heavy there. So I was going to ask, while you were saying that, where did this play into Shane being a minor as well? Because the other, co-conspirator there being a minor, not being extradited, things of that nature. How does this play out for Shane, who was a minor as well?
Yeah, I was kind of confused about that, because like I was confused about like his like age timeline, I suppose, because right before, I don't know, I guess I was confused, because if it was 2 weeks before his 18th birthday and this is like his lawyer's big excuse that like, that this was the reason why he did this, then like, did this all happen like within that 2 week period, like before he was officially an adult?
Right.
I guess if he was 17, then like maybe, I guess under this charge, they probably would have been able to try him as an adult in Tennessee.
Well, no, that's a good point. But I mean, I think, I understand what Shane's lawyers are trying to do here, but I think their point is moot, just because doesn't this go back for Shane, for her? You mentioned earlier about some victims mentioned they were harassed for 4 years or so. So, I mean, wouldn't that put him around 13 years old? I mean...
Yeah, well, and also, so just to be clear, I guess, the victims, collectively in terms of like the group of people he was working with. So not necessarily saying that like Shane had direct involvement in any of those people, but just that, he was involved with a group of people who, and that group of people were tied back to those 6 victims. And going back to 4 years before.
Good point.
I think specifically with Shane, if I remember correctly, I think it went back to July of 2018. Yes, July of 2018 is when his specific involvement goes back to. So I guess he would have been like 15 at the earliest.
Then, yeah. So still good point, and still moot from the lawyers there, though. I mean, that is a very heavy, thing to go through and emotional for sure, but at the same time, this has a track record now of you doing it.
Right.
And this is not just with, Mark or anything like that.
Right. And like long before like his dad had unfortunately tragically
Right.
passed. So ultimately the judge gives Shane some credit for accepting responsibilities for his actions, but the judge sides with the state and issues a stiffer punishment for him. Shane is sentenced to 60 months in prison or 5 years, including access to mental health treatment and also restricted access to the internet.
I wonder more about what the restriction for the internet access is. What that is. Is that a parole type of?
Well, no, I think kind of what I read into that part was because, there are, a lot of jails these days, especially I think this is a federal case, so this is federal prison. I think a lot of prisoners these days do have access to iPads and that kind of thing.
They do now, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, when restricted access to the internet, I guess, meaning, I don't know. I don't know what kind of access, the average inmate has to the internet, like what kind of websites they can access. I'm assuming it's really just, things to download, like, books and TV shows and that kind of thing. So I don't really know what the restricted access would look like for him, but I'm sure it means, you can't access,
social medias and things right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like nothing you can write anything in,
Do you remember back, around here in Onslow County in East North Carolina that they had done that with, the jail in Onslow? And how much of a uproar that was.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was meant for books
that.
and for music and things like that. But now I have seen a couple years after that where, inmates have access to social media and Facebook and Instagram and things of that nature. And it's not become what they intended it to be.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note here, like these websites that these people were accessing were not, your traditional websites. And I just think, when I think of, restricted access, like I remember back in high school, like we weren't allowed to access like Facebook, Twitter, that kind of stuff. But there were always websites that we found like as students that, administrators didn't think of. And I'm sure there are websites that like a lot of people don't think of that, are constantly being populated to post whatever the heck you want, in these deep, dark corners of the internet.
eBombsworld.com, I think. Do you remember that one by chance?
I do not. I don't think
Am I aging myself with that? Am I
a little bit?
Oh man. Yeah, that was one that was I'm trying to think of a website now. That might have been YouTube before YouTube. Quite honestly,
okay.
It had videos, it had memes, it had pictures, it had all kinds of things on there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much how things stood for Shane. He had apparently been released on bond shortly after he was indicted, but it was revoked just a month later when he violated the terms of his bond by, you guessed it, harassing even more people for their social media handles again. Shane is still serving out the remainder of his sentence, though. But the incident shed a light on the dangerous prank. Incidents of swatting have skyrocketed over the last decade, up to more than 1,000 incidents a year, according to the Anti-Defamation League. It's a practice affecting average people, but also people of notability. U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene had multiple incidents last year at her home in Georgia.
Wow.
David Hogg, a survivor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School mass shooting, has also been a victim. In 2018, a caller suggested that there was an intruder in his home with a gun, causing a SWAT team to respond to the house. The prank can also cost police department as much as $100,000 for just one call, but it can also be deadly. In December of 2017, a gamer was swatted during a game of Call of Duty. When officers showed up, he went outside to see what was going on and was immediately shot and killed by police officers. Back to January of 2015, a caller claimed a man in Oklahoma was going to set off a bomb at a local preschool. A SWAT team responded by breaking down his door, who thought someone was trying to break in. So he responded by firing shots at officers and shooting one officer in the chest, who luckily survived since he was wearing a bulletproof vest. It's led to a call for better legislation around the incidents. Massachusetts Congresswoman Catherine Clark introduced the Swatting Hoax Act of 2015, which would have strengthened punishments for perpetrators and required swatting calls to be logged separately by the FBI and local police departments. But shortly after she introduced the bill, Representative Clark became a victim of swatting herself.
Wow.
So here's how you can avoid becoming a victim of swatting. Don't share your personal information online. That includes sharing your address or phone number, but also just avoid putting photos of your home up online at all. You can also strengthen security online by turning on two-factor authentication to prevent hacking. That way, you'll know for sure if someone is trying to access your accounts and therefore your personal information.
I'm glad you mentioned the two-factor verification system, because that was something that even a couple of years ago, obviously, well, I guess with the timeline of this story, it was not around a lot. And so that was something that needed to change just with anything, whether it be, email or social media or your phones, right. Things of that nature. And it has changed the way that I've looked at the world for sure. On top of, what you had mentioned earlier about, sharing personal information online, very telling, very, information that gives away, things that you think is just so innocent. And myself as a father and a husband, this is something that I've had to think of now that when my children are going off to school and starting, grade school, that you don't put that kind of stuff out there, last names, first names, ages, likes, dislikes, things. There's a big board that you see, parents do when they have the first day of school and last day of school. And officers and law enforcement tell you not to do that stuff, because this is a perfect example of how, swatters can use that information against you. And it makes it almost too easy, for them down in the, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and I never really saw how they were able to access Mark's personal information. But I mean, like you said, it's so they are so creative these days, you know what I mean? And so you posting, you buying a new house and posting a picture in front of your new house, how exciting. And all of a sudden they can find you and figure out exactly where you live. And that's a way for them to prey on you. It's just crazy how people who do these kind of things are, getting more and more creative every single day.
Well, think about it back then too, when Twitter first started up and, Facebook was getting big and stuff like that. I mean, none of this was known. So people were just flooding the internet and social media with anything that they wanted to tell, their neighbors or their friends or their colleagues. I mean, you could have found it in one click, back then. So, for Mark, in his case, unfortunately, I don't know if that was the case, and I don't know if he, presented his personal information out there. But I would imagine if it was a average everyday American, then he most likely did, as I did. Maybe you probably did too. Things that I mean, we all did. Until we started to learn of things like this and swatting and doxing. Is that another one? That online harassing.
You're using words I never heard of before, so I mean,
there's
we need to do an episode on doxing. I don't even know what that is.
There's another one that if I'm saying it wrong, I might be saying it wrong too, but it's something along the lines of swatting as well, where you're harassing on social media and things like that. And I mean, it gets really personal for people out there that that have bad intentions, that have very ill intentions, and you can't really trust a lot of people, unfortunately, these days.
Well, I did just Google doxing. The action or process of searching for and publishing private or identifying information about a particular individual on the internet, typically with malicious intent. That's kind of... So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much exactly where we're going with it. So, yeah, it sounds like maybe, finding information about somebody and just putting it out there for lots of different types of people to see. That's definitely related here.
Yes, that was, I remember a couple of things around here that had happened with, and it was focused on more private information, whether it be photos, videos, again, stuff about your kids, things of that nature. And, and it was done so maliciously. It was done so as a way to get money, or to have somebody do something for them, or blackmail.
Right. Yeah, it's again just crazy what people will come up with for a few bucks. You know what I mean?
It is. So, money is tight these days. I mean, we talk about inflation, and we talk about the economy and hiring, and it's I know I'm personally going through some of that stuff myself with trying to get good people into work. And I know there are some good people out there, but man, there are better ways than crime.
Yeah, such as like, I don't know, like drinking just like a glass of wine, like with a friend. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm glad you picked up where I was leaving off on there. I'm glad
yeah,
you picked
there you
that
go.
one up.
I saw that's where you're going with it. I just like, I just went with it. So, well, that is all that we have for you this week. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a great time catching up with you and chatting about this, weird case. Weird case.
I know. I was wondering, and I've tried to keep it as genuine as I can. I mean, I know we could have, looked into it a little bit more and I could have asked you, but no, I mean, I enjoy these kinds of, discussions and finding out more about it. My wife is the same way, loves crime documentaries, loves any kind of TV show with crime. She can't get enough of it. I'm the same way. You and I working together, how many, crime stories and, coverages that we go through and some of the stuff that we've seen around here. While it is our job, at that time, it is, interesting and it does make you think.
Right. Yeah. Well, your wife sounds like the kind of, my kind of lady. So if you ever just like want to just like chat about a crime doc, I'm so here for it.
There's so many podcasts she listens to. I'm gonna put her on this one, by the way, just so you know. And
excellent.
Yeah, she
Good.
loves
Love
them.
that. Well, I hope she at least listens to your episode because, like, if not, whoo, you know what I mean?
We're gonna get on her for that one.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you and your work online.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, specifically, we're actually getting new websites coming, in the next few weeks or so.
Okay.
But the links don't change. They won't change at all. So there's still going to be, in New Bern, it'll be newbernsj.com. It will be jdnews.com in Jacksonville. And then it is kinston.com in Kinston. And again, that's the Kinston Free Press. That is the Jacksonville Daily News or the Daily News. And that is the New Bern Sun Journal. Obviously you can pick up a copy of any of those papers at, your local gas stations. Obviously, if you're a subscriber, you can find us, online, on the website, on social media, Twitter, Facebook. You can also find us on your smart device where you can download Apple Store or Google Play. And download our applications that way, and sign up for our newsletters. You can get them in the mail as well in your email. So tons of ways to get your local news around here in Eastern North Carolina.
Well, and I know you contribute to all of those newspapers too, and you're also a huge, like I think you mentioned a couple times throughout the episode, huge crime reporter. So if you have a cold case in North Carolina that just needs a little bit of a push to get off the ground, needs a little bit more eyes on it, you know how to reach Trevor, so that way you can get a little bit more attention to a story that you think needs a little bit more love.
Absolutely, and I know you and I have talked a bit about some cases as well, and there are some cold cases around here that we'll be bringing up, and that's just not even in Jacksonville, New Bern, or Kinston, but even around the state, as well. I mean, people, their loved ones, they need to have some kind of resolve and resolution into these cases. So any way that we can help.
Well, and that's why we're here. So appreciate you saying that, Trevor, because that's really what it's all about, is the people who love these people and deserve a little bit more attention, so that way they can rest a little bit easier at night knowing, what happened.
That's right.
So
100%.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and we will see you next week for another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.